Is a beautiful, oh no, dun dun dun. It is the 3rd of November. It is the 4th year of open Fabian Socialist and Soviet Socialist occupation of America with a K. Old Earth calendar 2011. So that tells you something right there, doesn't it, kids? Considering the amount of time we've spent this week, wait a minute, time this week, weeks going by so fast, it is already Thursday. I'll tell you what, when you look at the amount of activity going on out there right now, north, south, east, and west, I want to thank our friends down in the border area for an update. First of all, as much as anything, I want to emphasize a word that is now cropping up more often than not, and even though people are pointing out, first, sometimes you got to be careful here. When we're busy focusing on Operation Gunrunner, Operation Gunrunner, Operation Gunrunner, and we need to point it out constantly, so it's a good thing everybody is looking in the right direction. Let's not forget that, for instance, we had a character, the last couple of days here that was picked up originally in a big drug bust by one of the JTFs. That's, the MJTFs that supposedly didn't exist, that they told us all about, and then, of course, now you see them in the news constantly, but they don't exist, and that's patriot mythology, and, that's just crazy, and you guys that are talking about it, well, they're just conspiracy nuts, except that, JTF, MJTF operations not only are in your face, but, hey, down in Arizona, everybody knows about them along with pretty much every other part of the country, okay? And they may have had other names. That's the old story. The communists, when they changed their names, especially the Interior Police, for instance, 7 times, and the KGB changed its name 7, 8 times, they were still the same old KGB, just with a different nutcase at the head. Well, here's the thing. Operation Farcical and Facetious / Fast and Furious, and the reason they renamed it was to make it funny. It's so funny. Well, one of the things I told you about is now becoming apparent. This character got popped in a major bust, and they knew he was one with the cartels. They had him dead to rights. And lo and behold, it was, we're going to let him go. In fact, they deported him and walked him right back to the border, along with a whole bunch of others. He wasn't the only one. But the next few days, he shows up in yet another town in Arizona, driving at high speed through a school zone over 50 miles an hour. Over, 3, 55, 56. It always sounds more impressive when you go, over 53. Of course, that's also, if they're desperate, he was doing 51. But it's a 25-mile-an-hour zone, and, needless to say, that's twice the speed. So the cops try to pull him over. They're going to get into a chase. Lo and behold, when they finally stop him, what does he have on board? Well, he has firearms, but he has drugs. And everybody automatically goes, it's over the border. We watch all of the warm, fuzzy, softened propaganda. And the problem is this. No, he didn't have marijuana. He had, what was that? Let's see, meth, heroin. And it's like, whoa, back up. Meth and what? Meth and heroin. Oh, you mean like maybe a little bit of a briefcase or whatever, and they were trying to smuggle it? No, he had 100 pounds of meth and heroin that he was running across the border. Now, the key word is this, heroin. And there was another article, and what word jumps off the page? Heroin. And another word jumps off the page, heroin. And then another word jumps, heroin. And then opium. And then heroin, and then opium, and heroin, by the way, meant the hero's drug. That's really why it got, where heroin got its name. Originally, it was actually produced as a replacement for morphine, so that we could get troops off of the drug morphine when it was used as a painkiller, so they didn't die of shock, didn't die from other complications through the sensory system. Well, it turns out that the hero drug wasn't, and it was just as addictive, or at least, less addictive by one notch than morphine, which then, of course, then you have, that's right, you have those other drugs we created that are less still, but still addictive, but better than being on heroin or being on opium in general in its worst forms. Well, anyway, heroin this, heroin that, heroin and heroin, but nobody's emphasizing that. More it's like, he got caught with some drugs. And the reason they're doing that is because they're de-emphasizing one of the things that we've been pointing out from the word go on this. The reason the open border is in place is because of the Afghanistan drug connection. It used to be the old French connection. Well, it's the Tijuana, it's the Nogales, it's the Mexican border, it's the New Mexico border, it's the Arizona border connection. And it all comes back to concentrated wealth. I've pointed this out many times. Yeah, marijuana will make some money for them, but heroin is a lot more money for a lot less weight, as far as, or I should say, forgive me, volume, because weight's there. 100 pounds of heroin and meth. Now, the meth, hey, that stuff, there's no guarantee that the meth is what you think it is anyway. In fact, with the characters that are producing this stuff, it could be anything that's toxic. It's going to create a toxic response in your system and might still give the general effects of the high that they always promise. But heroin is the refinement process. In many cases, over in opium pills / Afghanistan, they are processing it to opium, or from opium to the next step, heroin, as quickly as they can in production facilities in Afghanistan. Then it's shipped out via U.S. military transport, private contractor transport, and by other means, to include donkeys, mules, and camel trains, like it's done for the last thousands of years. I shouldn't say hundreds or tens of years, thousands and thousands of years. The opium spice route is right through Afghanistan. Anyway, one of the most interesting and important parts about this is that word kept cropping up. Now, it turns out that in the incident before that, there was a series of shootouts, and there was, of course, a bust. More than a few of the weapons that were involved were part of Operation Gunrunner, Operation Gunrunner, Operation Gunrunner. Read that, farcical and facetious. Which, of course, throw out the newer name, or if you do what I'm doing. Or you mean farcical and facetious? Because it's actually Operation Gunrunner. Always correct everybody. No, it's Operation Gunrunner. It's been going on, and in fact, they don't want anybody to know what the real numbers are. Because the first thing that they said in this one of these articles, and it's in this one rag piece that was dated back, let's see, Saturday and Sunday, May 21st and 22nd, 2011, for the Wall Street Journal. Mexico's washing guns. Really? Why is Mexico washing guns? It's not because we sent them down there. It's because government agents were taking the guns south, grabbing dope, slinging it up here on the American streets, or promoting it and making sure they got their chunk of the change, their piece of the pie. Everybody does it, man. Everybody sells out, man. Remember that line? Remember that later line from that, the one character who was the spy rat in They Live? Remember that? Very end, y'all, let me show you boys around. And all of a sudden you get a better picture, even though not a complete picture, but you get a better picture of what's really going on with the aliens, / the invaders / the occupiers. Okay? So when we see certain, in fact, I noticed that one thing, and I'll guarantee this, they've been told, try not to mention exactly, in other words, don't de-emphasize what they were carrying or what they had. Even the Operation Gunrunner component, all of the shysters are, quivering lip. The reason I bring that up, too, is because in this picture, you see all of these slobs, and knowing this was done back in May when we were telling you Operation Gunrunner, Operation Gunrunner, Operation Gunrunner. In fact, a year ago, 2010, and 2 years ago, 2009, and in fact, the moment we heard this propaganda line that was generated, it was, guys, fat faggots have been taking weapons south. Now, it didn't take long to find out that one of the things they don't want anybody in America to know about is they didn't just use the straw man scam. That was just one little fingernail part of this whole Operation Gunrunner thing. In reality, they dragged weapons. They took weapons that were supposed to be returned to their owners and other weapons that they had stolen from people all over the country, both the ATF and FBI. And they literally had them transported, in some cases by the federal marshals, in some cases by other departments, to fusion centers or to sites that were attached to the fusion centers, which in reality are private / independent contractors, prostitutes and whores operating from outside the U.S., and as commercial contractors / pirates with letters of marque to the American people. Well, they distributed those weapons as needed in quantities, in buckets, truckloads, you name it, to whoever wanted to transfer them south to help orchestrate the idea that, well, Mexico has guns, so we need to ban the guns in America. That was the entire purpose of Operation Gunrunner from the front point. The back point is that in reality, they were able to move more opium, more heroin, than they ever have, probably in the last 30 years across the Mexican border. Let me ask you something. Let's put it this way. Now, we all know the marijuana, of course, is the joke drug until you get caught with it. And if somebody wants to arbitrarily use it as he's got dope, then they, of course, turn on the screws, or they can just ignore it, depending upon their need. The reason I say need is because most cops that bust the people that have marijuana bust them because they want their dope. And it's table scrapings. They get their dope for free. It's stuff you all paid for. The smugglers brought it in. They scrape it off, put it in a bag, and they take it home. And when they have their next parties, they're out there, smoking on the weed, dude. They got the wacky tobacco. They got the hemp. They got it all of their, from the people they're harassing out there, or the people they're lording over. However, they're also table scraping on the opium, the heroin, even the meth. / the, crack, man, crack. Now, the thing about it is, ask yourself, for instance, this one character that's got popped again, and of course, if we don't know how many people he's killed, and of course, we do know that he had farcical and facetious guns / Operation Gunrunner weapons, which means they weren't yours and mine. Those were ATF weapons. That was the ATF, FBI, DEA, Federal Marshals, and Homeland Security shoveling stuff south over the border. Okay? Now, what's interesting is, what does 100 pounds of methamphetamine, let's say we'll go 50-50, it could have been higher, it could have been lower. What does 50 pounds of opium look like? What does 50 pounds of processed opium as heroin look like? Think about it. Do you think that guy that just got stopped, only 100 pounds of meth and heroin crossing the border? If you grab one like this, others, how many semi-trucks are getting the wink and the nod are coming across the border right now because they just opened up to the Mexican drivers? Do you know how many different ways you can do stuff like that they're not even going to bother looking at? Probably the best example is in the frames of vehicles and the frames of even the boxes. You can put dump tubes in the equipment so that all you got to do is just load it from the top. It's gravity dump bottom, and it can look like whatever you want it to. It literally is part of the structure of the vehicle. Now, God knows what's in that, but you see, they don't really care what you're putting in your veins or what you're snorting or what you're ending up inhaling, no matter how toxified it becomes from other storage and material. They don't care. And, of course, the government doesn't either, which is mostly who's pushing the dope. So heroin. And where's that heroin coming from? It's not coming from Asia for the most part, although here's the other part of the story here. We have to focus on Afghanistan, but that's part of the Golden Crescent. Now, another word you all heard back in the day, Golden Triangle. Where, and this is for all our younger people, where is the Golden Triangle? Would you like to guess? Let's just say, chung, 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 chung. Oh, you harvest opium. You are very happy. Harvest opium when we chop your head off. See, yeah, that's right. The opium trade over there hasn't changed at all. It may have changed hands because, since Vietnam, there's been a lot of death and dying. There's been a lot of people just dying of old age. And Vietnam was back in the early 70s, middle 70s, guys, 1975 for the fall of Vietnam. Okay? So with that being the case, this is year 2011. Not much in the dope trade dies of old age. So you got to figure a new management, of course, has come up or sprung up to compete against the old groups that were out there, or it's been more core centralized, and the governments of the respective countries that are moving whatever dope they can make up for national trade problems. It's the other reason they want to ban, drugs in general right now, as far as make it, decriminalize them, as they say. If they were to do that, what few legs are holding up or propping up these economies with regard to the illicit trade and the scam and the whole series of jobs that revolve around all of this that they're doing would cease to exist. Of course, the dope trade itself would be in the toilet too because, if it was just over the counter or everybody just didn't care, the biggest problem you'd have then are copies and filtering and all kinds of things that would be done to desperately try and make up lack of volume and lack of trade. Trying to satisfy the customer, but at the same time realizing that, hey, everybody's doing it now, or everybody's in business. Of course, everybody's doing it, and they're all doped out on opium. Oh, that's not good. And by the way, where's all that opium going? It's getting into America. So how is it being used? I mean, we already know the meth is bad enough. Any of the meth family, as far as the toxins, because that's really what it should be called, the toxins that are created chemically are absolutely deadly, and it's not a matter if they're going to kill you, it's just a matter of when. Basically, I'm really getting high on that allergic reaction. Yeah, really? Okay, well, that's not going to last long, and by the way, you've lost a lot of weight, and you don't really look good. And, of course, that's a downward spiral. Well, opium/heroin isn't going to be any different, but where are the numbers, and where's the discussion about the statistics? Since we have gone into Afghanistan, since we are now making sure that the spice must flow, how many additional people attacked on the streets? How many additional people picked up and found with the big H word, heroin, or with opium? How many have been found? And it's just not one of those things you don't need to look at. Why is the press told they don't need to look at it? Well, for obvious reasons. It's not good for the business of those shysters in government and those private contractors who are in the dope trade. In other words, they want to wait until it's endemic or epidemic in nature, and then they'll go, oh, look at the problem. How did this happen? Like Operation Gunrunner. The government provided the dope, pushes the dope. There are lesser characters that get involved. By the time they're done, guess what? Everything is in motion, and then they can go, oh, this is so horrible. How could this have taken place? Well, that's right. We went over and bumped the Taliban out so that they could completely expand the opium production, which had been brought down almost to zero. Oh, that's right. The spice must flow. So we were sent in there to make sure that the dope trade flourished and to make sure it got to American shores. Opium has been used as a tool by the British Empire before and on the American people. These drugs are being used the same way. So as long as we look at that when we're looking at the rest of this game, we'll understand full well where the problem is. But what really is disgusting to me when I see all of these other pictures, when I look at the faces of these characters, they're as disingenuous as the day is long. They look like liars. We know that they are liars. And the whole pile of them are just slobs. Bunch of stinking slobs across the board. Not one of them worth the powder it'd take to blow them away. But and again, even on the little poster in the back, it's the OCDETF Strike Force. And there's all these cute little symbols in the back. Well, the Sheriff's Department, even they're dirty as the day is long with regard to what's going on, because they're not presenting or bringing forward the rest of the story either. In fact, they're just worried about how can they become part of the cash cow, tit-sucking crowd that's out there. It's really the emphasis that was really where they were headed. And that's why they really don't want any other private or, the general population to deal with this problem and just nullify it because, well, then why would they have, or how would they have an excuse to find more government teats to suck off from? Give them the money locally. Okay, well, how about we don't send it to Washington? Washington has no business doing that. The local economy takes care of it. And if the local economy is kind of, stuck like everybody else, guess what? They're going to have to become more efficient at what they're doing, and that means focusing on the real problem, which is the border itself. Shut down the border, your rear areas all become pretty clean real quick. Shut down the border, and everything else that we're talking about behind you just strangles out for lack of supply and for lack of material. See how that works? Just control the border. It's finished. It's all done. Now, the other thing about this, and again, these numbers with Operation Gunrunner, should be understood, guys, that no, there's only one basic rule. How many weapons did they get across the border? as many as they could in as many illegal ways as possible and unlawful ways with regard to the ATF, FBI, DEA, federal marshals, and Homeland Security smuggling the guns south. It's not 2,000 weapons. It's over 70,000 weapons. It's not just from the straw man. That was just like one finger of a hand. Weapons that were supposed to be returned to people like you and me, in other words, property owners. What happened is pulled them out of the property rooms, took them down through the elevators and all the triple lock doors and all the security sites, and waddled them out the back door, past all the cameras, in front of everybody else around. Nobody was supposed to say a word. And they shipped them on down to the border and sent them down to kill Mexicans, Mexican people, men, women, and children, south of the border, and Americans north of the border. And that if that is going to continue to be the problem across the board, and it is the responsibility / the specific underlying, shall we say, benchmark for Osama Bamba Ding Dong and the Chipmunks, Holder, the bathhouse boy, Biden. Don't leave Biden out of this. Vice President is in charge. He's the director of Central Law Enforcement. They all knew about this. The Secretary of State knew about it. And I'm emphasizing this for a reason, guys, because heroin is what's showing up on the border. Now, you just ask where that's coming from. And it got all the way around the planet to the Mexican, northern Mexico, where they came over here, in exchange for those guns. Concentrated well. They don't have to eat as much. They don't get any profit on it. We're going to be back right here in about 5 minutes. You stay tuned. Grab that next cup of coffee. Hold on real quick. Oh, yeah, it's a work day. It's Thursday. We'll be back right here on the Micro Effect in the morning.
I got a shot.